Hello guys, welcome back to our Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of upcoming episode Throne of Seal based on novel. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start. At that time, it wasn't only Kia's clothes that were annihilated, but even her whole body showed signs of not being capable of bearing it. It was fortunate that her assimilation of the spiritual stove of samsara had taken place long before, and that she could fully use its devastating power. After passing through 10 years of fusion, the spiritual stove of samsara gained perfect harmony with her body, thus even when her body was breaking apart, the spiritual stove of samsara gave off some energy to protect her. However, even so, the spiritual of samsara was only protecting her body and didn't lessen the pain. Just think, what kind of pain would come out from having your own body being torn to shreds? Thus, at that instant, Kia's body felt extremely numb, before an incomparable pain hit her, plunging her in an even more terrifying state than at the time of her initial assimilation of the spiritual stove of samsara. Even if it was Long Houchin instead of Kia, he would perhaps have screamed miserably. However, Kia didn't. Having been tormented by the spiritual stove of samsara since being a 3-year-old girl, she was extremely tenacious, and kept clenching her teeth and bitterly bearing the pain. The fusion between 3 spiritual stoves was just far too challenging. Even with the lead of the spiritual stove of samsara, she still faced an extreme and unavoidable danger. Because the others had just absorbed their newly obtained spiritual stoves, the process of their fusion wasn't as hard for them as for Long Houchin and Kia. However, this was the first time obtaining a spiritual stove for all of them, and the familiarity of their contract with their brand new stoves was limited. Thus, the process of fusion wasn't a breeze for them either. To the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad, this trial could only be described as an extreme challenge. Their strength, their willpower as well as their determination permitted them to face it, but in case of failure, they would very probably not only lose their spiritual stoves, but also their qualifications to remain a team of equal peers. Everyone clearly understood this, and thus absolutely didn't give up. Wang Yuanyuan was waiting silently, surrounded by a boundless sight of green, as a dense vitality was emerging from her body. She could even sense her own external spiritual energy being imperceptibly strengthened. However, she was not in the mood to immerse herself in enjoying the benefits from having her external spiritual energy go up. After not being able to undergo the third trial, she could only wait here and couldn't do anything else. Because she didn't want to bring troubles to her mates, she didn't attempt to leave. And close to 3 hours had already passed. The illusory paradise would open for a total of only 3 days, thus after 3 hours of bitter wait, even Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but start cultivating. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to refrain from leaving. Loneliness was after all often an even greater torment than pain. Finally, with a glint of golden light, a figure appeared near Wang Yuanyuan, surrounded by a green glow. Right after appearing, this person couldn't help but scream. As his body spasmed violently, he fell to the ground and landed on his butt. "Are you okay?" Wang Yuanyuan hurried to ask with concern. The first one to appear was none other than Zhong Fangfang, who had just broken through to the 7th step. Zhong Fangfang opened his mouth wide, taking deep breaths. On his forehead, large amounts of sweat were flowing down. After a lot of difficulty, he finally relaxed, and after he took a deep breath, he replied to Wang Yuanyuan with a smile, "I'm all right." Wang Yuanyuan unhappily asked, "Are you really all right? The last time you said that, you were already close to becoming handicapped." Zhong Fangfang revealed a smile, scratching his own head, "I am really all right." However, the fusion of spiritual stoves was far too tormenting. If not for the fact that I had just reached the 7th step, and had a sufficient amount of spiritual energy to accomplish the fusion, I'm afraid that I wouldn't necessarily have managed this. Speaking of which, that Yi Xiaolei was really quite lenient, since my spiritual energy has reached 10,000 units after this breakthrough. It looks like she can really control and alter the regulations of the illusory paradise to some extent. Wang Yuanyuan appeared pleasantly surprised. The fusion was accomplished. How did the spiritual stoves change? Standing up, Zhong Fangfang gave her a smile. "Yes. I have given this spiritual stove I obtained after the fusion the name Spiritual Stove of Second Life. Take a look." Saying that casually, his eyes were lit up with a golden glint, and immediately afterwards, a golden brilliance appeared on his chest. Instantly, another Zhong Fangfang appeared in front of Wang Yuanyuan, but this one didn't have any equipment on him, forming an existence only made of golden light. "This me possesses an eighth of my total spiritual energy, and can even use any weapon I'll give him. He'll listen to all my orders." I can summon him once a day, and the summon will last for an hour. I can ascertain that the fusion of the spiritual stoves caused them to gain great power. Wang Yuanyuan looked startled at that golden figure, filled with envy. This sort of cloning spiritual stove was close to reaching the second tier as a spiritual stove. That was already an incredible amplification. And this clone also persisted for a long time, but more importantly, it was able to use equipment as well. Although she didn't know what tier the spiritual stoves Zhong Fangfang had just obtained reached, a spiritual stove of the second tier was bound to raise his strength greatly. Relying on this, he was already qualified for the challenge to obtain a mithril foundation armor. Seeing that Zhong Fangfang was already alright, she unconsciously drew back. When she was prepared to sit down again and keep waiting for her comrade's return, Zhong Fangfang suddenly asked, Yuanyuan, do you already have a boyfriend? Wang Yuanyuan turned around to look at him with a start. Seeing Zhong Fangfang's scorching look and the manly spirit filling him, she was somewhat frenetic, unconsciously replying, no, I don't. Then that's good. Zhong Fangfang visibly relaxed at that reply. Wang Yuanyuan's eyebrows went up, why is that good? Do you think this girl cannot find anyone to like her? Zhong Fangfang immediately looked panicked, no, don't misunderstand me. That's not what I meant. I just like you. When he said these last few words, the two of them looked dumbfounded at each other. Wang Yuanyuan only felt a pain in her heart, but rapidly responded while carrying a serious face, but I don't like you. Did you think I would give my heart away, just because you saved me? Let me tell you, I don't like men. For the fact that you saved me, I will make it up to you in the future. Saying that, she immediately turned her head away, and stopped looking at Zhong Fangfang. However, at the same time, she found out that her own heartbeat had gone wild, and when she finished giving this reply, a feeling of remorse totally unknown to her, instantly spread inside her. Zhong Fangfang didn't say anything and only looked at her silently. She didn't turn her head either, and the atmosphere started to become awkward. A good while later, Zhong Fangfang seemed to have cheered up a little, and declared in a rough and gloomy-sounding voice, Yuanyuan, I haven't said that while believing that you came to like me. After all, we haven't known each other for long, and regardless of whether you like me or whether you like men or women, my feelings for you won't change. Letting you know about them is enough for me. Wang Yuanyuan's shoulders trembled, but without turning around she asked, what do you like in me? Her voice had clearly softened, and at that time, she thought of the scene when this man had declared that he was all right even with two handicapped hands. Zhong Fangfang's reply was, do you believe in love at first sight? This is my honest answer to this question. I can only say that I don't know. However, I feel very glad that fate enabled me to meet you. Wang Yuanyuan fell silent once again, and Zhong Fangfang didn't say anything further. As the expression on his face looked more relaxed, he sat cross-legged at the same place, attentively watching the tall and slender girl standing before him. Right at that time, a second silhouette came out in a green light. His miserable appearance was even more unbearable than that of Zhong Fangfang. Immediately dropping flat on his face, he embraced the ground. Surprised and scared by that sudden turn of events, Wang Yuanyuan hastily stood up to see that it was Hanyu who fell to the ground. Hanyu wasn't only gasping for breath, but immediately fell unconscious. Without giving Wang Yuanyuan the time to step forward, a golden light fell accurately on Hanyu. It was great recovery, a single targeted healing spell of the light element. Zhong Fangfang steadily pushed his hands on Hanyu's chest, sensing the changes on his body. A bit later, Zhong Fangfang said with a relaxed voice, he's all right. If I am not mistaken, his fusion should have succeeded too. There's a very gentle yet tenacious form of spiritual energy of light in his chest. It is certainly the power of a spiritual stove. Wang Yuanyuan nodded before looking at the serious Zhong Fangfang and said, then that's good. The two of them looked at each other, but Wang Yuanyuan immediately escaped right after that, turning her head away again. She didn't dare look further at Zhong Fangfang, unexpectedly quite afraid to see the serious look in his eyes. Lin Xin was the next one to appear from a green mist of light, looking totally worn out. Hey, has drugs bro, are you okay? If the fusion failed, just let it be, it's okay as long as you are all right. Wang Yuanyuan said, trying to console him. Hanyu said with a bitter face, this fusion was just too hard, to the point that even his control over fire turned out insufficient. Who said that I failed? I'm just pained over my hair. Reaching this point, Lin Xin couldn't help but keep crying. Nonetheless, his appearance was enough to cause anyone to feel sympathy. His magic gown was burnt to scrap, and on his head was just a large black swatch of hair. His graceful dark green hair was completely reduced to charcoal, and the same went for his eyebrows. Nonetheless, looking at him, he was in a better state than Han Yu and Zhong Fangfang at that time. At least he didn't collapse immediately. Wang Yuanyuan declared unhappily, "Just let him cry, until he dies of it. What is there to feel sorry for the loss of your hair? This is good too, you'll be bald just like Sima. It will make you look more like a man. Perhaps Sister Shina will like you even more." "Really?" Lin Shin's crying voice dissipated a little, as he raised his head, his eyes still hazy with tears, and asked. Wang Yuanyuan shryly replied, "Nope, that was a lie." Zhong Fangfang said with a smile, "No matter what, we have so far at least all succeeded. I hope the others will clear their trials successfully too." After no less than half an hour, Chen Ying'er and Sima Xian appeared nearly at the same time. It was just that the two of them were in totally different shapes. Chen Ying'er looked messy, and immediately fell unconscious in Wang Yuanyuan's arms. Her clothes were soaked with sweat and had gone completely transparent. She couldn't bear it any longer and collapsed with great effect. Sima Xian's appearance was even more miserable than hers. At the time he appeared, he looked like a piece of barbecue meat. He smashed onto the ground, carrying a fragrant smell of burnt meat. His skin looked totally carbonized, and some parts of his flesh really looked roasted. Han Yu and Zhong Fangfang healed him with their full strength, before Sima Xian could at last be considered to have come back to life. But the two of them were still unconscious, and didn't wake up even after half an hour. In particular, Sima Xian had really sustained very serious damage to his body. Taking Lin Shin's pills, and getting healed only kept him barely alive and no more. It was hard to say whether there would be sequelae from the aftermath. A golden light ripped through the green light, and a golden figure emerged from the fog of light. Of the light element, Sima Xian, Han Yu, and Zhong Fangfang had all already appeared, and Long Haochen was the last one left to appear. However, right at that time, everyone looked simply lifeless. This was because from that green fog of light, a slender and smooth pure white leg appeared. In the midst of these lifeless stares, a sweet-looking beauty came out of the fog. Fully grown, she reached a height of over 1.70 meters, approximately the size of Wang Yuanyuan, and carried a beauty that gave off the feeling of a divine existence. A golden battle skirt protected her most important places, but her chest aside, her arms and thighs, gave off the milky white precious feeling of a gem, and on her forehead was a golden caltrop-shaped gem. This elegant face carried a dim smile, and in her right hand was a 2-meter-long golden staff, embedded with a golden gem emitting a soft splendor. Her beauty gave a sacred feeling without the slightest flaw, and her fair legs didn't directly touch the ground, but floated around 1/5 of a meter high in the air. Sensing everyone's sluggish gazes, the girl had a smile on her face. "Don't you recognize me?" You are," Lin Shin cried out in shock. The staff in the right hand of the girl lit up with light, as the upper part of her body bent forward. Immediately afterwards, 3 pairs of wings abruptly spread on her back, like petals of a flower. Each of the bright wings had the transparent look of butterfly wings, but was a lot larger. The instant they spread out, a sunlight-like halo immediately appeared under the girl, as a soft golden fog of light revolved around her body, yating. Everyone cried out simultaneously, looking foolishly at the fairy. Was that really the light elemental fairy they had robbed from the hands of the demons under Long Haochen's lead? Was this for real? It was no wonder that they were in such a state of shock, as the current yating looked nearly the same as a human. If she were to land on the ground and retract her wings, she would simply look the same as a normal human girl. As she was now, she seemed nowhere close to an entity made of pure energy. Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but move closer and touch Yating's hand, feeling her softness, warmth and the satiny skin. It felt very good to the touch. You obtained your adult form. More accurately speaking, she should have become a real fairy, actually a different kind of fairy than she was before. Long Haochen's voice resounded, and immediately afterwards, he stepped out from the same green fog in the air. In comparison to the others, he appeared almost unaffected. Not looking exhausted in any way, he just gave a strange look to Yating. The current Yating was the result from the fusion of the 2 spiritual stoves, and this could be called a fortuitous change. The illusory paradise was undoubtedly the most fitting place for a fairy to live, and because of this coincidence of fate, Yating had absorbed a huge amount of vital and light essence. All her wounds had been completely healed, and she had obtained a corporeal body in the process. How beautiful. If I didn't already have Shina, I would have really fallen for you. Lin Shin declared without any shame, carrying a pitiful expression that caused all the others to be unable to help, but reveal a smile despite the situation. Long Houchen told Yating, please change back to your original size. Yating pouted in response, but master, this will reduce my strength. Long Houchen revealed a forced smile, it should do if you go back to the size you had before. At the time we will need you to go all out, you can just come back to this form. Yating's evolution gave her even the ability of human speech, okay. Yating nodded, somewhat dissatisfied, and under the regretful male gazes, the halo of light vanished as she returned rapidly to a small size. This reduction in size was very thorough, to the point that she was now only about a third of a meter in length, flying to Long Houchen's shoulder where she sat today. Although she already returned to a small size, Long Houchen still felt a bit awkward about her sitting on his shoulder. But he had already ordered Yating to do something she didn't want to do out of selfishness, so asking for more wouldn't be good. Turning around and looking at that dark green fog, Long Houchen's gaze grew frantic, as he murmured the words, now we are only missing Kia. Indeed, currently everyone had already returned with the exception of Kia. Since Sima Xian and Chen Yinga appeared to be seriously injured, he could temporarily not ask them about their trials. The possibility of the spiritual stoves being lost couldn't be excluded. Yating didn't stay idle and released healing spells one after another, aiming them at Sima Xian and Chen Yinga. Regarding healing, she was a lot more reliable than Han Yu and Zhong Fangfang. Having someone who could really heal also meant that the 21st General Grade Demon Hunt Squad was no longer lacking a priest. Time passed minute after minute, and Long Houchen's look only became more and more frantic. Unconsciously clenching his fists, he prayed unceasingly, Kia, you can't let something happen to you. You definitely have to be successful. He was already filled with regrets, regretting that he added one more spiritual stove for Kia to take in. If this had been only about fusing the spiritual stove of Samsara and the 1,000 Strikes spiritual stoves, the trial would have been easier for her. While Long Houchen was filled with regrets, a sweet voice resounded in his mind, great fool, you're worried aren't you? Serves you right. I'll bring you to her place, she's already totally powerless, and needs you to bring her back. This was Yi Xiaolei's voice. Long Houchen rejoiced at this statement and hurriedly nodded in response. In a flash of green light, he twisted his own body anew, and immediately afterwards, Long Houchen disappeared into the green light. However, Yating was repelled by that green light, and was not able to enter alongside Long Houchen. When his sight cleared again, he found himself in the same green pool where the fusion of spiritual stoves took place. The water here was actually not so deep, and purely made of vital energy. Regardless of the situation, he just felt as cozy as when soaking in this deep water. According to Yi Xiaolei's words, this was not the same place where he had been, but the place where Kia's fusion of spiritual stoves took place. But just where was Kia? Although Long Houchen felt agitated deep inside, he still calmed himself down, and didn't search blindly. Slowly closing his eyes, he relied on his mental strength to strengthen his own perception, looking for traces of Kia's presence. This deep green space looked endless, but Long Houchen very rapidly found traces of her with his great mental strength. Immediately, a weak living energy was sensed by him. Without the slightest hesitation, he opened his eyes and headed to the place where his senses led him, toward that living presence. It was Kia. Coming closer, Long Houchen discovered Kia with a mere glance. At her current state, her body was completely soaked into the green liquid, with only her face floating above the water, looking pale to a threatening degree. If not for the weak living pulse that still remained, she would perhaps look like a corpse floating above the water, Kia. Long Houchen called out grudgingly, and hurriedly threw himself at her, giving her a hug. This hug wasn't anything serious, but he immediately looked sluggish. Entering in contact with her delicate skin, even with the presence of the deep green liquid, he clearly felt this tender tactile sensation. Her exquisite curves and all parts of her were bare. Under this touch, Long Houchen felt something similar to an electric shock. Although Kia and he had been together for quite long now, the two of them were after all of young age and ignorant regarding things between males and females. With the fear of harming her, Long Houchen had been staying reserved and only gave her at most kisses and hugs. But he had never directly touched her skin like that. At this very moment, although he didn't even carry Kia out of the water, he could feel every single part of her body. This was his first time having such a kind of feeling of closeness. However, Long Houchen's sluggishness only lasted for a short moment, and in spite of the intense changes in his heart and his embarrassment, Kia's safety mattered the most to him. He bit the tip of his own tongue, that caused a sharp pain, to awaken his own mind and slowly poured his own soft holy spiritual energy into Kia's body. Long Houchen infused her very slowly with his spiritual energy, out of fear to cause harm to Kia's body. After some of his spiritual energy had streamed into Kia's body, he managed to sense her condition through his spiritual energy. Kia's body was in a terrible state, many of her energy channels were destroyed and some of the most important meridians were almost severed. Only the fantastic dark green vital energy barely kept them attached. Using the words hanging by a thread to describe Kia's condition would be no exaggeration. If not for the immersion in the vitalizing green pool, it would have taken her merely a little instant to die. Sensing the danger Kia was in, Long Houchen was shaken even more violently deep inside, and his steady stream of spiritual energy was released even more carefully. A gentle holy mantle spread onwards, wrapping Kia and him inside. It wasn't that Long Houchen wasn't capable of using more powerful healing spells, but Kia's current state was just too weak. Therefore, he didn't dare to use high-intensity spells to heal her, only prudently restoring her body. He couldn't be overly hasty or else, he would very possibly produce the opposite effect. After an unknown amount of time passed, Kia's damaged energy channels were finally restored, and although this couldn't be called a complete healing, it was at least guaranteed that all her energy channels were reconnected. Deep inside, he thanked Yi Xiaolei from his heart. Kia's energy channels had been severely damaged, but because of the care given by the illusory paradise, those damaged channels were barely preserved by the gentle energy of life, that not only saved Kia's life, but also made it a lot easier for him to treat her. The holy mantle that surrounded Kia didn't cease its healing effect from beginning to end. As Kia's body gradually recovered, one surge of energy after another entered her energy channels, and was absorbed along with the vital energy from the surroundings. With the help from Long Houchen's healing magic, Kia's recovery sped up a long time later. Kia's body shook slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. However, Long Houchen once again wore a sluggish look, and it was exactly because of Kia's shaking. It was strong enough to affect him, and caused the careless move that followed. His right hand slipped on her chest, and grabbed a mellow and soft rising mound. His fingers and palm cupped it, and even if he had been more ignorant in this regard, he would still have known what he was touching. At the instant that happened, Kia's eyes were already open, and she happened to feel the warmth of his large hand on her. Staring at each other, the two looked just as dull as their counterpart. Yukia's trembling voice was light, and a rose-colored blush appeared on her face, spreading smoothly even to her neck. Long Houchen didn't know how to react. Moving his hand wasn't the solution, and getting out of the way wasn't right either. And his astonishing impulse actually urged him to continue. Raising her arms with an exaggerated movement, Kia's pearly white teeth bit her own lips as she held Long Houchen with both of her hands, pressing her own body even closer to his. Not daring to look at him any further, she could feel her own heartbeat accelerate as her level of panic increased. However, her panic and shyness aside, she felt more satisfied than anything else. Kia's past experience was only filled with darkness and loneliness, but ever since meeting Long Houchen, her heart kept changing ceaselessly. Every time she encountered dangers or difficulty, her idiot was the first to join her side every time. In Long Houchen's eyes, this was just natural, but in Kia's eyes, this was the greatest happiness. Hearing Kia's words, Long Houchen hurried to take out some of his own clothes from the eternal melody. Not worrying about the clothes she was given to wear, Kia already stood up from the pool of water. Her movement was very fast, and with a turn of her body, Long Houchen's clothing already covered up her figure. However, because she was only clad in upper garment, the sight of her slender thighs was unavoidable, and in spite of the cover that it formed at the crucial area, this gave off an all the more mysterious alluring feeling. Long Houchen foolishly looked at her. His eyesight was incomparably good, and although he only had a glance at Kia's changing, he still saw what he shouldn't have seen, and seemed to have seen everything. Now, he didn't even dare move, for fear that the fiery feeling in his heart would surge out. Not daring to show any affectionate movement towards Kia, he was currently like a fire surrounded by surges of oil, ready to turn into raging flames anytime. Seeing his thoroughly red face, Kia only sneaked a glance at him before running to his back. "You are not permitted to peep." "Oh, yeah." Long Houchen gave an answer with difficulty, but the sight of his Adam's apple gulping back his saliva sold him off. Kia's thighs looked different than Yating's. Long Houchen found out to his shock that a certain thought reached his brain. This thought was that Yating was certainly beautiful, from her long and slender legs to her perfectly straight, rich and flawless figure, but although Kia lacked a lot in comparison, her leg had a sleek curve and her body a sweet scent very unique to young human girls. More importantly, seeing her leg, although Long Houchen felt bashful, it felt like releasing him of all burdens. "All right, time for us to go now." Kia's soft voice sounded at his back. In a mechanical motion, Long Houchen turned around, immediately seeing that Kia had changed back into some of her own black clothing that covered all of her body's beauty. She also handed Long Houchen's clothes back to him. The Sign of Light was not a saint. And even if he had been a saint, there would surely still have been times when he would have been unable to hold back to some extent. Because Kia's injuries had been critically severe, so Long Houchen had wanted to stabilize her for the time being. Thus, even if the feelings filling his heart were burning, he only let them emerge for a bit before leading Kia back to the illusory shrine in a rush. "Yating, heal Kia." Long Houchen landed, and told Yating, who felt still a bit unsatisfied about having been abandoned by him just before. The current Kia was still weak, and didn't notice any difference about Yating. Long Houchen turned in Zhong Fangfang's direction. "Brother Zhong, please stay here for a bit longer. I have to send off my comrades first of all. This method is our team's greatest secret, so please don't ask or tell others about it." Zhong Fangfan nodded in response, "Be at ease." Saying that, he directly walked in front of Wang Yuanyuan. "Hit me." Wang Yuanyuan became blank. With a deep look at her, Zhong Fangfang continued, "This way I won't see, nor hear or sense anything. Isn't that the best way to guard this secret?" Long Houchen said with haste, "Brother Zhong, there's no need to go to such." Before he even finished, Wang Yuanyuan's hand hit Zhong Fangfang's side with a cutting motion. Instantly, his body became limp and fell to the ground under Wang Yuanyuan's support. Lin Xin couldn't help but react by saying, "Yuanyuan, so you really put your hands to use like that?" Wang Yuanyuan shot him a glance, asking, "Do you want me to do the same to you?" "Don't, there's no need." Lin Xin repeatedly waved his hands with haste. Wang Yuanyuan gave a look to the unconscious Zhong Fangfang, thinking secretly in rage, "Serves you right, to perturb my heart." Since it was already getting late, Long Houchen didn't dare waste any more time. Leaving Zhong Fangfang, Kia and Yating there, he triggered the Eternal Melody and transported his comrades back. Sima Xian and Chen Ying's injuries were already stabilized. It was just that they were still in deep sleep. Their wounds were actually not as critical as Kia's, and after some prolonged healing, they just needed some nursing for the time being. With a glint of golden light, Long Houchen returned to the illusory shrine. Sensing the changes on the light essence in the air, he couldn't help but let some surprise show from his eyes. After his awakening as a god's chosen one, his control over the light element was visibly a lot stronger, to the extent that he managed to manipulate the Eternal Melody all the more smoothly. Atop of that, he was already back to the illusory shrine, and wasn't in the illusory paradise anymore. Thus, getting transported back didn't take up so much spiritual energy. After waking Zhong Fangfang and letting Yating return into his own body, Long Houchen led the group of 3 out of the illusory shrine. 3 days wasn't a long period, but it wasn't short either. Both the Temple Alliance and the demons were waiting impatiently outside the shrine. After all, this time, very important figures from both sides had participated. On the demons' side, the 10 chosen candidates were young powerhouses of great lineage, whereas from the Temple Alliance 10 promising demon hunters, including the Sign of Light and the Saint Daughter of Samsara, had participated. Therefore, both sides were nervous beyond compare. As soon as they saw a figure emerge from that dark green shrine, Ling Xiao and Huang Shuo couldn't help but stand up and swiftly rushed to the lakeside. Both parties' powerhouses were in a state of mutual hostility, and in case any change occurred, a battle could very possibly break out any moment. Long Houchen was walking in the front, and seeing him, Han Qian felt a great load fall off from his mind. Unconsciously he gave a look to the temple knight who calmly watched Long Houchen, making good preparations in case of the demon's possible attacks. Behind Long Houchen followed Kia, and then came Zhong Fangfang. Ying Suifeng and Ling Xiao relaxed at the same time. No matter what one could say, the most important thing was that the Sign of Light and the Saint Daughter of Samsara returned safely. And looking at them, they undoubtedly didn't come back empty-handed. However, Ling Xiao's expression rapidly grew unsightly, because they were the only 3 to come back from the illusory paradise. As for the captain of the Black Dragon's Imperial Guard Huang Shuo, his expressions grew all the more unsightly. The fact that the humans were the first to come out was no good news to him. Rapidly, Long Houchen's group of 3 returned to the side of the Temple Alliance, the others didn't come out yet. Ling Xiao asked Long Haochen. Long Haochen let out a sigh, lowering his head. His expression already told a lot to Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao's face immediately looked ashened. These had been demon hunters from commander-grade demon hunt squads. Their loss implied that 7 demon hunt squads were in danger of breaking apart, and the blame for this would be for the priest temple to bear. Long Haochen coldly looked at the demons, saying in a severe tone, the 10 demons that came this time had all suppressed their cultivation, and none of them were powerhouses below the 8th step. Their external spiritual energy reached 20,000 units for each of them. Under these circumstances, we were basically no opponents. What? Ling Xiao lost his voice in surprise. On the other side, Han Qian pulled Long Haochen's sleeve, signalizing him not to say anything further. Without a doubt, the blame that the priest temple would shoulder this time was enormous, because they were the ones to initiate this collaboration with the demons. Long Haochen turned his head to look at Han Qian, nodding to his ancestor, and showing his understanding. Ling Xiao's aura became visibly unsteady. The human powerhouses from the side of the Temple Alliance all started to turn hostile, and were ready to attack at any time. However, Huang Shuo's side didn't shudder in fear. As the captain of the Devil Dragons, he reached the conclusion that they surpassed the human group as a whole, and that these opponents were nothing to fear. However, Huang Shuo still did his utmost to suppress the killing intent filling him, because he had clearly sensed over these days that a formidable presence was concealed among the enemies. Its terrifying threat even shocked him. It seemed to him that as long as they acted against the other party, a risk of suffering destructive damage would befall them. In fact, Huang Shuo wasn't an ordinary powerhouse of the 9th step. His strength already reached the peak of the 2nd rank of the 9th step, his total spiritual energy reaching close to 300,000 units. Even for the demons, this level was attained only by a few powerhouses. He acted as the representative of the demon god emperor, and yet perceived the enemy as a threat. So this hidden powerhouse had to reach a terrifying level of strength. With him here, in case a battle broke out, the damage their demon group would sustain would certainly be considerable. They were after all in the human territory. Long Haochen shouted aloud, however, the demons also paid a considerable price this time. Although they were all powerhouses that came this time, among them were several successors of demon gods. Their group was led by the successor of the demon god emperor, Bao. Still, they didn't pay a low price either. Saying that, with a flick of his hand, he revealed a black flame in his hand. This flame clearly didn't emit the holy properties related to Long Haochen, and everyone saw the shape of crystal crown appear in his hand. This was exactly the crown of heritage from that fiend of blue flames named Shenshong. Seeing this magical crystal, the powerhouses from the Temple Alliance couldn't help but cry out in surprise. This confirmed Long Haochen's prior words without a doubt. On the other side, Huang Shuo's look became all the more ugly. Of course, he recognized the owner of this magical crystal. Although the owner of that crystal wasn't the most powerful demon that participated this time, he was still at least among the top 5 in overall strength. No matter what, he had no idea how this crystal could have fallen into Long Haochen's hands. Seeing his appearance, he didn't reach 20 years in age. Humans and demons were not the same, and he could tell his rough age at a mere glance. Indifferently, Long Haochen produced a brilliant flicker of light, as his eyes were filled with an ice-cold look. The stare he gave Huang Shuo didn't give off a weak impression. At least 3 human survivors left the illusory paradise this time. As for you, reaching this point, he deliberately paused his words. Even if Huang Shuo was calm, he still couldn't help but be in great turmoil at that time. Looking at the distant illusory shrine, he immediately became pale. In fact, this time only demons acting as successors of the top 4 demon gods had participated. It was for the sake of obtaining some spiritual stoves, while obeying a secret order of the demon god emperor that they came. If these successors had all died in the illusory paradise, the blow inflicted to the demons would be incomparable. It would possibly even shake the foundation of the demons. Since Long Haochen took out 1 crown of heritage, who said that he wouldn't have other crowns of heritage? Hearing his tone, Huang Shuo's group was not optimistic about the situation of their team in the illusory paradise. Speak, what happened to them? Huang Shuo reacted in fury, while his threatening aura abruptly rose. The terrifying oppressive power almost instantly reached its peak, and even in the entrance to a living heaven filled with vital energy like illusory paradise, the whole area was filled with darkness instantly. Ling Xiao answered with a cold snort and his hands flashed golden. From the milky white staff in his hand, a gentle golden brilliance spread to the surroundings, easily blocking the rich breath of darkness, and affecting their whole side with a drizzling light splendor. Understanding Long Houchen's intention, he didn't utter a single word, and gave him room to handle the matter. The powerhouses from the Temple Alliance also drew their weapons successively, preparing to enter battle mode at any time. The pressure spread by Huang Shao didn't affect Long Houchen in any way. Instead, he exposed an indifferent smile on his face. "Why should I tell you anything?" Huang Shao gave him a cold look. "If something has happened to them, we will inevitably tread on the southern mountains city and spare no cost to kill all humans up to the last man." This sentence was said categorically and without any hesitation from his side. He didn't know so much about the other clans, but he had a particular understanding on the Devil Dragon lineage. At the present time, the demon god emperor of the Devil Dragon clan had only 2 children, Bao and Ling Xiao, and both had entered the illusory paradise this time. In his opinion, given Bao's strength, he wouldn't possibly have encountered any trouble in the illusory paradise, no matter the circumstances. The reason those 3 humans were still alive could only be out of his leniency. They were bound to return with great gains from this trip. This was the important reason why the demons were willing to pay such a great price for the chance to enter the illusory paradise. However, he absolutely didn't expect this twist. It could indeed be seen that the casualties on the human side were disastrous, since only 3 of the 10 that had entered returned alive. And judging from Cai's appearance, she was surely in a very weak state. But more importantly, none of the demons from their group had yet returned alive. The greatest disadvantage of the demons during this operation was their lack of understanding regarding the illusory paradise. All the understanding they had was issued from the demon god emperor's deductions, as well as the predictions from the star demon god. No matter what could be said, at least Bao and Ling Xiao hadn't come back yet, and there was still the daughter of the moon demon god to consider. The moon demon god's side was still better off, since this time, it could be said that Yi got a place only because of her relationship with Bao. But none of the devil dragons could be afforded to be lost. Although the demon god emperor was still young in age, his reproducing ability had reached the state where he couldn't possibly have other children. Under these circumstances, if Ling Xiao or Bao were to have died in battle inside the illusory paradise, this would be a devastating catastrophe to the Devil Dragon clan. Since time immemorial, the Devil Dragons were led by the successive generations of demon god emperors, inheriting the pure lineage of the Devil Dragon bloodline. Never before had a demon god emperor of another bloodline been chosen, and atop of that, Bao had already gained a definite prestige within the Devil Dragon clan. It reached the point that if they had died in battle, the demon god emperor was bound to be totally furious, and could only take out his anger on him and his group. For this reason, Huang Shao's eyes looked red. He appeared calm, but was only filled with ideas of cruelty and slaughter. He was already prepared to blow these opponents to kingdom come, and would rather die here than return and bear the fury of the demon god emperor. Indifferently giving a vague expression, Long Houchen revealed a cold look from the bottom of his eye. "It's not impossible for you to learn about their whereabouts. And I can even tell you that they were not all killed in battle, and that some are still alive. However, just why should I tell you anything?" Long Houchen said that in a very calm manner, and his face didn't show any superfluous expression. Hearing him say this, Han Qian and Ling Xiao both couldn't help but smile. This kid was indeed just too intelligent. They obviously could tell that if Huang Shao was made overly anxious and start a fight, the demons would admittedly face huge losses, but would the humans really be able to weather the conflict unscathed? In fact, this was not the recently embattled southern mountain city, which formed a natural fortress. And this time, the overwhelming majority of the demons that came were powerhouses of the 9th step. Even if they had just crossed the threshold to the 9th step, and didn't have any weapon on them, they were still the Black Dragon Guard. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.